Friends here. Oh, I just got a notification we're recording. Okay, so welcome everybody. I am super excited about this opportunity today. Thank you to Source Books. Thank you to our wonderful authors. I didn't even ask. Is it Kimberly and Gilly? Is it Gilly?
It's Gilly.
Gilly. Okay, I'm so sorry. I should have asked that ahead of time. I'm sorry.
You asked when it mattered.
Right? True. So I'm just going to quickly thank you from Project Lit and our fearless leader, Jared, and just thank you for the books that you write, that you are writing. Hopefully you're writing more because they really make our job easy. Our goal is to get books into students' hands that represent them, that engage them in deep conversations, that they can see themselves in. And you've made that book choice for us really easy because you have written amazing books. So thank you and welcome all the Project Lit leaders that are out there on the streets every day, pushing books into kids' hands, making sure that they are engaged in good reading, good literature, and books that represent them and kind of break the norm, right? So thank you, everybody, and welcome to tonight's event. So exciting.
Thank you for having us. I have to say, first of all, we are Project Lit fans, so we're super excited to be here, and forgive us if we fangirl over you guys because you are out there doing the work with the kids that we are writing for, which is awesome.
So we have, I don't know if Kimberly wanted to say anything before I got started with our questions.
No, I'm ready for the questions. This is my favorite part.
Yes. Okay. So, one of the most interesting questions that I had was really just, there are so many messages in the book. There are so many things, so many takeaways. My best friend calls them nuggets. Like there are so many nuggets that we can take out of the book and then elaborate on and have good conversations about. What's the one thing, like what's the one thing you would want us to share with kids about your book? Like, why did you write Why We Fly? Like in your author's note in the beginning, you speak to the Kennesaw students and like what your inspiration was for it. But what's like the one takeaway you want our readers to kind of leave with after reading Why We Fly?
Kim, you want to go first or you want me to?
Sure. I would say one of the takeaways that I would want kids to think about is not making rush decisions, how a quick answer is not often a bedfellow with the right answer. And so, that's a lesson that these girls have to learn a very, very hard way, is that you have to think things through for the safety of yourself and those around you, both physically and emotionally. And so it's okay to have to take a beat and think about something and run the consequences through your head and then ask yourself if you're prepared to deal with the consequences, because it's very difficult, very, very difficult to garner empathy from people when they know that you made a thoughtless decision and now you are expecting for people to corral around you to fix it. And so what I would hope is that they learn, let me think before I say that. Let me think before I post that. Let me think before I do that.
Love that. I think I would also add that think about how to be an ally, how to be a good ally, right? So in part, this is the story of someone who has good intentions, but is not very careful about the impact of what she's doing and maybe not thinking about it from the perspective of the community she's trying to be an ally to. And so another nugget would be, what does it really mean to be an ally? What's the difference between an ally and an accomplice? And how do I become the right type of accomplice to communities I want to support?
Oh, that's awesome. Like one of the things I was thinking about too, as I was reading, there are so many, like, taking a knee during the anthem and like, just like you said, like planning that out, like, you guys had a lot of planning that I'm sure that was involved in writing the story to begin with. And so many of us are curious about that process. You found something that was like an inspiration. I don't know who found it first, but you find that inspiration, then you're like, hey, did you see like what does that look like? How did that sound?
Gilly always finds the inspiration. I'm not the inspiration person. That's Gilly. Gilly finds the inspiration, and then she bullies me into doing what she wants me to do. That is the God honest truth. And so she will find something and be like, not even like, we're so close now. We're like sisters that it's not even like, oh, Kim, what do you think? She's like, this is what we're doing. So I need you to look at these links. And it works perfectly for me because that's kind of how I have to be managed. I'm a little wily, and it's good for me to have someone adult around because I really just think adulting is a half of a star experience. Would not recommend. It's the adulthood is the worst hood I ever lived in, and I'm not interested in it. And so Gilly is the person who's like, let's get it together. Let's figure this out. This is impactful. And then after that, it's the weirdest thing because I'm not even like a super like spiritual person, but I promise you, like, it's like this oddity of things lining up after we put it out into the universe. Like once Gilly told me we were writing this, I went to a protest and met the Kennesaw cheerleaders. This is after she told me that. I had no idea that I was going to meet them that day and that, the stars were going to align. So I do believe things like that help with confirmation. But yeah, my inspiration is wanting to please my literary wife.
AKA I'm the bossy one.
I think that's okay because I'm a procrastinator, so I feel like every deadline is my bully. So I love that comparison of having a bully. You touch on, like having a concussion and what that's like for our sports stars. And, whether it's in middle school or high school or college, sports, it happens. It's a part of their everyday life. And even in elementary now, we have parents sign concussion forms, like, acknowledging that this is something that can take place at any time. So I love that little, the beginning of her, Eleanor, dealing with a concussion and what that looks like for her as a cheerleader. And I also loved the part where you guys mentioned, and even if it's briefly, it's so important, especially to our students. You talked about making those rush decisions, right? And in the book, you're talking mostly about the decision to kneel, stand up for something that you believe is a good cause, right? And then you talk about, really briefly, you talk about sexual activity in our teenagers and how boys get the high five on occasion. And very often that's what that looks like. And girls get slut shamed. And, we are talking about these books with students and we're real with them. We try to make sure that they realize this is a reality of the decision that you're making sometimes and what that looks like and how that looks different. So I don't think it's a question. It's just like a nod to you and thank you for that, because no matter how much we say it, a lot of times authors become the people they listen to more than the people they're with every day. So thank you for putting that in there so I can point it out and underline it. And then like back to your, like how you guys do this collaboration. A lot of times when we talk to authors, we talk about, are you a plotter or a pantser? And like, I can't imagine what your planning looks like. Like, is there like this big spreadsheet that you guys are going through? Is it just conversation? Like, it's so natural. And the conversations in the book seem so natural and unforced, which is sometimes what we come across. We come across books that are really good. And then there's this really forced, uncomfortable part. And you're like, it just didn't feel natural, where everything in Why We Fly feels super natural.
Well, I'm going to give full credit to Kim on that. Kim is the dialogue master. Her background is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to talk for you. We steal each other's best lines at this point in time. Her background is screenwriting. And so we always like to say, like, our partnership works because we lean into our strengths and we support each other through our weaknesses, right? Like the two of us do not bring to this partnership the exact same strengths and weaknesses, right? As Kim mentioned, like I'm sort of more the idea person and the bossy person and the like schedule it out person. And she is very creative and plot oriented. Her background in the entertainment business also makes her this master of plot and pacing. And so, I'll talk first in a second about how we wrote the second book, which is a little different, but like the snappy dialogue and the witty dialogue is like Kim thinking with that very cinematic, this has to sound as good as it reads on the page. And so it's a gift to work with her because of that. Kim, did you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I would say also on the flip side, Gilly is the master of like description. She is beautiful at making sure you understand and see the landscape, that you know what it smells like in the room and where they are and what that looks like and how they feel. And so a lot of times I'll write all of this dialogue, it'll look like a mini script, and then she'll just say, you know, where are they? What are they seeing? What does it smell like? What is in the room? How are they getting from point A to point B? And so to her point, like, and I'm a screenwriter by trade. So structuring a novel, that's what Gilly is really good at, is structuring it, making sure it's arcing properly. But but the good thing about it is, like, we decided very early on that, like, we were gonna put ego to a side and just celebrate each other's gifts and pick each other up in our weaknesses. And so nothing is ever personal. Like, for the most part, when it comes to dialogue, she concedes to me and lets me win because she's like, that's what you do. But when it comes to structure, and she's like, we need more interiority to here, she'll say, like, give me a second, let me write out this scene about where they are and what it looks like and what's supposed to be happening and who's entering the room. And I just concede to that. It's never a beef, because we know the book benefits from us both adding our strengths to it. Like, you're going to get the strongest pieces from me and the strongest pieces from her. And, why wouldn't we want that?
Can we just say for a minute that during the barbecue scene, I was there and I wanted to sample both sets of ribs to see who had the best tasty ribs. But that whole scene, like, moving from the outside to the inside to what it looked like with the boys around the TV, with the coach and the parents, like, you were there, like, you really felt like you were there. So that's awesome. I loved it.
Thank you. Our process for this one was really different, right? Like, I think sometimes you think like, this is how I write, but so for I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, we swapped chapters back and forth, and Kim predominantly wrote one voice and I predominantly wrote the other. We did the polar opposite. For this book, we wrote the entire thing sitting side by side, in part because, that's how we work best together. But also because the book they were more interwoven into one another's stories in a different way in this book from the outset. And the voices were not quite as distinct for this one. They come from a more similar background, more similar lived experiences. And so it was I think one of the most interesting things to me, at least, I don't know what Kim thinks, was that it felt really good to write really differently for this book.
I have a question about Aunt Rhonda. So is she modeled after anyone in one of your lives? Because she's so powerful, and you just kind of feel her, like, when she talks, when she walks, when she shares with the kids her opinions. Like, I just wondered if she was modeled after anyone in your lives, or who you channeled when you were writing her, or maybe one of you is her.
No, I think Rhonda represents who we'd all love to be. Like, we'd all love to be that sophisticated, educated woman who has all the answers, and that can, like, she is like a superhero. Like, she can shut down misogynistic undertones in 2.5 seconds in a single bound. And so it's like, we all want to be Rhonda. Like, I'm sure you guys can all relate to this. You ever have a disagreement with someone, and then you get in the car and you think of all the stuff you should have said? You're like, man, I should have said this. You know what? If I see them again, I'm going to say that. Man, I should have responded. Like, Rhonda just can do that instantly. And I'm like, that's something that I think we all have a deep desire to do. And I've met people who are like Rhonda, who just have a catalog of answers and explanation and brilliance in their mind. So I don't think she's one specific person. I think she's like a mix of just like powerful women like that we've experienced.
Yeah. Agreed.
I'm with you 100%, especially about, like, after the fact. I'm like, man, I could have said this, 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 and this. And I think people in the chat also commented. So I love that she met Trevor Noah. Sorry, that's one of my life goals. I would love to meet Trevor Noah. And the other thing I was thinking about too is there, I think a lot of times when we're, like, in that moment, it's really hard to, like, show that, like, think that intelligently. Like, you got to research it, figure it out, find it out. And she's just epic for me. She's absolutely epic for me. The other thing I was going to ask you totally just slipped my mind. So I'm going to go to the questions that other people have asked. I'm sure it's going to come back to me. Oh, I know it did just come back to me. Thank you for the positive glimpse into a Jewish girl's life. So I've had the privilege of working everywhere from Detroit to West Bloomfield, for those of you that know Michigan. And I've also worked at a Jewish Orthodox day school. And finding that voice is super challenging. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I know like 3 kids I could definitely recommend this, you know, that are actually in high school right now, that just love to have their voices heard or seen in a book. Like that was powerful for me as being, you know, an educator of students, you know, that don't see themselves. You know, we are in an amazing time right now where we have wonderful authors like the 2 of you that are writing these voices that we've never been able to find before. So thank you for that. Yes, and someone said Jewish voices that are not related to just the Holocaust. So that's amazing. So thank you.
That actually really means the world. I am Jewish, and before this book, I don't know that I thought I would ever have the courage to write a Jewish voice onto the page that was more like how I grew up. So I grew up Reformed Jewish. My Judaism is culturally and ethnically an enormously important part of my life, but I'm also not terribly religious, right? If you want to ask me a question about like the rules, I'm like, you might need to find someone else. But it's also very hard to like put an identity that's that close and that meaningful to you on the page. And it was Kim's bravery that gave me the guts to do it, right? Because she wrote an incredibly beautiful and powerful character in Lena, who was exactly who she wanted to put on the page. And she knew, and we knew that Lena would be controversial to some people, but she just said, this is what I want to do. And it was that bravery that gave me the guts to put Lenny on the page in this book. So, and I'm sorry, we're both crybabies, and this is the one that gets me a little teary. So I'm glad that resonated, and that means a lot.
Especially the part where she's talking about just the service and how calming it was and how at peace she felt. And I think a lot of us we can relate to it even if we aren't Jewish, because we feel that way about our faith. Like it's, you know, it can bring us peace. So that was awesome.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of a thing that I hope YA literature in particular embraces. I think people's faith communities are really important in their lives. And I think sometimes it gets a lot of attention when the faith related thing is the conflict in the novel. But for most of, like, my Judaism isn't necessarily like a daily conflict in my life, but it is enormously important. And so I really hope that we embrace seeing kids like in their faith-based. I also, like, my personal soapbox is addressing social issues through your faith-based community is an enormously powerful way to do it. And I hope the faith communities like are out there championing these issues and talking about them.
I don't know how much more, Ashlyn, you're going to have to cut me off because at some point I might not know how to stop talking. It's like the teacher in me, right? And then, you know, having the opportunity to talk to, you know, New York Times bestselling authors, like I don't ever get a chance to do that. So you might have to cut me off. So tell me how much time I have.
Yeah, I think you have maybe like 6 or so questions we can go through, and then we can open it up for questions by participants.
Okay, so there is a question in the in our Google Doc that we have that asked about is there another collaboration in the future? Like, do you guys has Kimberly been bullied into a new topic yet? Let's say that.
Yes, I'm constantly getting bullied into new topics by her, but it's okay because we like jokingly think of ourselves as like a female Wu-Tang clan. So we don't think of ourselves really as like individual writers. We think of ourselves as a team, and then it's like, and sometimes we write apart. But we love writing together, and we love taking this journey together. We're best friends, so we love, you know, being around each other and touring with each other and traveling with each other. And it's funny because a lot of people think because of what we write, because we write these dual narratives about the Black and white experience in a book, that there must consistently be like beefs and fights, and we have like these epic throwdowns with each other, but we really don't. Like I could like count on one hand with fingers left over. Times we've even been like irritated with each other and we've respectfully taken a break. But even honestly, like now I'm going to get all misty and sappy. Like COVID was so hard for me to be away from her. It was so hard for me to be away from her because I'm just not used to that. Like I'm used to being with her all the time. And especially in 2019, like we spent so much of the year on the road touring. Although Source Books is gracious enough to get us our own separate hotel room so we can decompress. But, and I'm like, that is sweet because I can't imagine what it's like to have a writing duo. It's like, oh, everything we have to pay for twice? Good grief. But yeah, like she honestly, like she's my soulmate. She's the love of my life. And so like, I don't think we'll ever not write together.
Yes.
She's like, did exactly what she said. One of the questions was, what was the reasoning behind making the friendship between our two main characters so split as the book proceeds? And I had some thoughts about why I thought, but I would love to hear what you guys were thinking.
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think there's a couple different things, right? One is what they go through and the way, so one of the other sort of nuggets that we didn't mention before, but is the disparate treatment of Lenny and Nellie in this book, right? They are singled out and treated, Nellie is singled out and treated differently, right? So statistically, Black girls are much more likely to be punished and much more likely to be punished much more severely for infractions. So number one is, as people interact with them in the story and their choice, they're treating the girls differently in a way that might make it hard for them to continue to be friends and understand each other. And two is sometimes high school friendships are seasonal, and you know, they whether or not they ever took a knee, I guess I would say, like, do you think these two girls in particular would have continued to be quite this close once they went off to college, or are their paths so divergent that they naturally kind of would have drifted apart from each other a little bit? Both answers are valid, probably, but to me, I think this is a little bit of a seasonal friendship that can't continue to exist in its exact same form.
Plus, we wanted to explore ripping two girls apart because in I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, we brought two girls together. So that's how we describe them. We're like, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight tells the story of two girls coming together. Why We Fly tells the story of us ripping two apart.
Also, just because we're evil authors and plots need conflict.
True. How did you meet? How did the two of you meet? This has to be a good story based on the way you just laughed.
So Kim used to be the manager of an amazing bookstore in Decatur called Little Shop of Stories. It's an independent children's bookstore. It's fabulous. If you're ever in Decatur, please visit it. And she was the manager there at the time. And she ran this book club called the Not So YA Book Club for adults who like to read YA. And shockingly, neither of us are YA any longer in our actual ages. So we kind of got to know each other a little bit through that book club. And then there were a number of authors, aspiring published authors in that group. Becky Albertalli was in it, and Rachel Allen, and who else was in the book club with us, Kim? I can't remember. It was like a bunch of people. Lauren Morrill.
Yeah, Lauren Morrill, who writes the most amazing YA rom-coms, if you guys haven't read any of Lauren's books.
Yeah.
So like everyone's published, that like a good chunk of that book club is published now.
Yeah, it was really, there were good vibes in that club. But so we would go like every quarter or so, the people who were writing and looking to be published would go on writing retreats. And we went on one of these writing retreats together, and we discovered that despite having really different backgrounds, Kim grew up in Chicago and I grew up in the Tampa area. And, you know, it doesn't seem on the surface like we should have so much in common. We discovered that we have an incredible amount of common. We're both single mothers with both, at the time we were managing day jobs and creative kind of night jobs, the aspiring writing. We're both divorced from professional athletes, which is a whole thing in and of itself. So we discovered kind of all these commonalities that we had, and we got to know each other through then. And then I started bullying her into writing with me. And you're all welcome.
I'm so glad you did. All right, so I am going to take a break from asking questions, and I think we're going to turn it over to the group, Ashlyn, to ask, or in the chat. How did you want to do that?
whatever you guys want to do. You guys can turn on video and ask. You can just unmute and ask.
Do you have
I'm
any
sorry.
brave?
I have a question.
Greg can always chat a question.
Hey, I'm curious about all the cheerleader inside stuff. Was that fun to research, or how did y'all get all the scoop on the hardcore cheer moms?
Research, it was really fun. I will say, hilariously, even though a lot of our books center around sports, neither Kim nor I are sporty people. I have a really, I have an elite athlete son, but to me, like, it's all sports ball. So we did a lot of research. We had a couple of sort of people who are heavily into the cheer community that we consulted with. There's a wonderful woman named Liz Shaw, who's a teacher in Athens, Georgia, who was on the competition squad at University of Georgia when she was in college, who helped us out kind of with a lot of the accuracy of that. Also, we watched a lot of cheerleading stunts on TikTok.
Yeah, they are athletes, no question.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's a really fun part too, right? And I think we try to touch on that a little bit. You can't keep, we call it kitchen sinking, right? You can't kitchen sink every issue into a book. Otherwise, it's an encyclopedia and not a novel. But we touch a little bit sort of on the tension that the girls feel being treated like cheerleaders versus athletes, when they really are extraordinary athletes and gymnasts. And they compete and train and practice just as hard as the football team, often for a lot less glory.
Yes, it's true.
So I'm curious.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey guys, I don't know if you remember me. We met at Anderson's and we had a great discussion about your first book. Kimberly, you were really, really active in the Black Lives Movement and such. How did that affect how you wrote this story? I loved your activism. I followed you every single day you're doing stuff. Did that affect how you wrote the story?
Yes, it definitely has an influence on like the decisions that I make, because I'm super conscious of the fact that, I have a different kind of responsibility in terms of what I'm putting out in the world and particularly how I'm influencing the children. And so I have to be, conscious of that. But Gilly and I also always say our books are not a morality tale. This is not about a fantasy world of how we want things to be. What we want to write is how things are, and hope that we're giving kids tools to grapple with real life events that are happening with them on a day-to-day basis. Both of these incidents were inspired, both I'm Not Dying for Tonight and Why We Fly were influenced by incidents that happened to teenagers dealing with real life situations. And so we don't often have conversations with teenagers who are having these lived experiences simultaneously as we are. But I also consider what Gilly and I do part of my activism work. I think of Gilly as an activist for that reason, in that, writing these books about social justice and traveling around the country in high schools, we're actually giving kids the tools on how to enter into difficult conversations, because Gilly always says this, growth only comes from discomfort. Growth comes from discomfort. And so a lot of people don't know how to navigate that. So to have a book that you can utilize and see yourself on the page and reflect back on what the character did, so it doesn't feel so personal to you if you're having some weird feelings, or you're feeling like, oh, maybe I did exercise some implicit bias in this moment. You can say, well, when Campbell did this, or, when Eleanor did that, or when, Nellie did this thing, and you can place it, you can process a little bit easier. Because a lot of times the reason why people don't want to have these difficult conversations is because it's uncomfortable, and they're fearful of the notion that if they admit that there's growth that needs to happen within them, that they're a bad person. We should all aspire to continue to grow and be better and get better. And so I feel like this makes it a little bit easier. So to me, this feels like social justice work. It definitely feels like social justice work. So I think they influence each other. I think my work on the ground influences the books, but I think the books also influence the work I do on the ground, because a lot of the things that I know that I need to do, or programs and stuff that I work on are very youth centered. And that's because me and Gilly spend so much time in schools listening to kids, and I realize how much resource they are desiring.
Mhm.
Shelley put in the chat that your book is on her social justice board. I wonder if she means the Why We Fly. I wonder if she means the Why We Fly book.
Well, it was I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. So I made this big, after I read Internment, and it was like, then I saw Read, Write, Resist. So I made a big poster with the board, with a tree, and then it says Read, Write, Resist. And then I have little pictures of a whole bunch of different books for the student. I'm a librarian, so for the students. I do have a question, since there seems to be a little, how do we go about, if we wanted you to visit with our school, or I'm also the current president of the Southern region of the California Library Association, and we're always looking for speakers for conferences and workshops and things like that. So how would we go about inquiring if we wanted you both to be speaking or visiting or anything like that?
We're gonna toss that to Ashlyn.
Yeah, you can contact Sourcebooks. And I can follow up later with an email address for you, and we can help coordinate that.
That would be awesome. Like, I'm working on a lot of doing school-wide reading books and author visits, and my kids did really great this year, so I want to include more. I like to have windows and mirrors. I dress every kid with where they are, and I like to say it's not just what you look like on the outside. There's more to that, because my daughter's adopted and she's African American, and her name is Lena. And so when I was looking for books for the library, I'm always on top of that. When I saw your description for I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, I'm like, oh, Lena, I got to get this book. And I really love to pair it. I think it's great with All American Voice, because you can address the girls and the boys. And so my thing is, I want every kid to see themselves in the library, whether it be what they look like on the outside or whatever their thing is struggling. And I definitely don't have enough cheerleader books or Jewish main characters that have nothing to do with the Holocaust. So
I love that you pair it with All American, because we have a fake beef with those boys that they do not want to adhere to. We have just decided that we're beefing with them because we have the boy and girl version of each other's books. And so we're always like, yeah, those are our mortal enemies, Brendan and Jason. And then Brendan and Jason are out in the world being like, we love Kim and Gilly so much. Like, if you haven't gotten their book, get their book. They're our favorite girls in the world. And we just know the world needed a girl version of our book. And we're like, don't do that. You make us look bad. We're telling everybody you're our mortal enemy, and you're out there talking about you love us.
Meanwhile, they're like the two nicest men on the planet. We actually were already writing I'm Not Dying With You Tonight when All American Boys came out. And our initial reaction was like, oh no, someone did it first. And Kim reached out to Jason, who said, like, no, we need all the stories. Keep writing. This is necessary. And so don't ever tell them, but credit to Jason. Otherwise, we might have quit. But don't tell him we said that ever.
What I really love too is, like, you hear so many books are one version or the other, and it truly is, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, everyone has misconceptions about some other person or race or family that's not anything that they know. And I think that was what was really great in I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, that both girls had misconceptions. And so it was really nice to have that for kids to see.
We really love that, because we actually like to say that I'm Not Dying With You Tonight is as much about perception and perspective as it is about race. What else?
I just think what I really loved about this book was, that it was about the decision, and like that, hey, what was your plan after that? And it looked at how their friendship sort of grew apart, but yet they both grew so much because of it. They looked at themselves, what do I need to change? How do I need to do better? And found her place in both their places. So it's just a brilliant book. I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, of course, but this book, it was brilliant how, and it just, that the 9-day suspension for her and nobody else, including the band members and 3. And I have to ask you, how'd you come up with 3?
Kim, do you remember how we came up with 3?
I think we started with the name and then worked backwards towards what his character was. Because I think we're like, let's give him a nickname because all athletes have a nickname. And we were like, let's call him 3. But we didn't know why we were calling him 3. And then we worked backwards and started being like, oh, they say he runs so fast, it's like he has 3 feet. Because originally I think we thought like, you know, the stereotypical like, oh, maybe his number is number 3 on his jersey, but we're like, nah, let's make it more interesting than that. So then we decided he was so fast, it was like he had 3 feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I would add, and maybe this is actually, if I could like go back in time and change my answer on the nugget, I think also what I'd say about some of that is like and a message I want teenagers to hear and embrace is we are all more than our worst mistake. We all have the capability to be more than the biggest mistake we've ever made or the worst decision we've ever made or the offensive thing that we've said. I think Kim and I both believe pretty firmly that there is a road to redemption from mistakes. And so both of these girls make mistakes. They make bad choices. 3 makes mistakes and bad choices. He handles his relationship with Lenny really badly. But I want there to be a road to redemption for these characters, even if they don't get there by the end, because neither of us also believe that that's something that happens overnight, right? Like your Instagram apology tour is not the end of the work, but the notion that there is recovery after you have said and done some things is really important to both of us. So in part, that's also kind of the trajectory of these characters in the book.
One of the other things that I loved is that you also brought the voice of how a lot of us feel right now with the rabbi's sermon. So for those of you that have your book, at the top of page 116, where the rabbi, is quoted in his sermon, just talking about how I think a lot of us feel right now. And do you want to read it? Do you want me to read it?
Will you read it? Neither of us have physical copies yet.
Sure. You don't?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
We will change that.
When I look around, both at our larger world and our own community, I see enormous pain. I see injustice, and I find I sometimes struggle to find the right words to discuss it with my children and with you. There are those who deny the humanity of people of color, who ask that they be silent in the face of unequal, hateful, violent treatment. And I think as educators, I think we deal with this more frequently than we would like to. Like it's that, what can you say? What can't you say? How do you continue to raise your students in a world where sometimes they have to think differently than the adults that are raising them. So I felt like, wow, this part right here, like somebody gets it. Like this is something that I deal with more frequently than I would like to admit, just because of adult conversations that you have to stay in a certain lane sometimes in order to keep your job. I know Jared truly understands what I mean by that. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Well, so first of all, I have to say, Kim and I are winning a bet with ourselves. The character in I'm Not Dying With You Tonight that turned out to be a fan favorite was a shock to us. Like we had no idea. We never in a million years would have predicted it. So this time before the book started going out into the world, we'd like bet with ourselves over who the favorite characters would be. And so far we're right. We had a feeling that Rhonda and the rabbi were going to be some fan favorites. So we're excited. He actually is inspired by a real person. So the rabbi with whom I started doing social justice work is really David. His name is David Spinrad, and he's now at a synagogue in Virginia. Not exactly, it's not a biography of David, but it is sort of heavily inspired by Rabbi Spinrad.
Yeah, and Gilly and I both have taught. Gilly has taught at the college level, and I have not done traditional teaching. I can't imagine how both rewarding and exhausting. It must be simultaneously. But at Little Shop, we did a lot of like after school programs and summer camps and things like that. And so we spent a lot of time, you know, we both have spent a lot of time with young minds. And so that is always part of your dilemma, is because you want to pour into them so viciously, but you also know besides your job, there's a parent on the other side of that child and maybe not interested in all your crazy rhetoric, you know? And so you find creative ways to allow kids to explore these notions for themselves. One of my most favorite things I did when I was the store manager at Little Shop of Stories was I ran a summer camp called American Girl, based on the historical American Girl doll books. And so parents knew what they were signing up for when they signed up for my camp. And the girls would live as the American Girl doll. So they would live as Addie in the morning and maybe Rebecca in the afternoon. And when they were Addie, we would escape slavery. We would cook traditional African-American cuisine. We would do all of these things. When we were Rebecca, they would cross Ellis Island. Many times when they crossed Ellis Island in the square, I would change their name. I would say, no, Jezerowski, you're Jones now. And so they got to have these lived experiences. But, you know, it's different for me because parents are signing their kids up for a camp where they know I'm having a social justice conversation. I can imagine how difficult it is to navigate those waters in a school system where you have both the bureaucracy of the school system as well as parents that you have to grapple with. But you're also like, I also cannot let these children go out in the world this naive either. Like, so I feel like the teacher should answer that. That is you guys have that superpower. We just hope we're writing books that help you in your fight.
Yeah.
I think I speak for all of us when I say you definitely are. So thank you.
I think we also wanted to put on the page sort of what it means to grapple with a controversial issue, right? So we started writing this book in 2017, 2018. A lot changed in the summer of 2020, right? A lot, I think, of dialogue shifted. We'll yet to be seen whether it's lasting change or not. But, you know, this was, and to some extent still is, the notion of kneeling during the national anthem is a really controversial conversation. And not everybody within any community is necessarily supportive of the action. And there are different consequences that the characters face. You know, 3 expresses a lot of concern over having spent his entire young life aiming to make the NFL and understanding that taking an action might have really big real world consequences for him. I mean, Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have an NFL contract, even though the dialogue shifted radically from the summer of 2020. So I think we also wanted to put on the page the notion that different people are going to grapple with this thing, these controversial issues, these topics, as strongly as some people feel about them. There is, you know, not always necessarily 100% alignment about what the right way to proceed is.
Sorry, my 4-year-old is begging for my attention.
The chat's also open for questions if anyone has any.
Well, I'm curious, the parents, y'all did such a great job with the 2 sets of parents. Were those modeled on parents of maybe your friends, or excuse me, your son's friends, or parents you knew from sports, or from your kids growing up? Because they were so different, but really, really accurate.
So one thing that we wanted to do is the parents are pretty absent and pretty rough in I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. So one of the things was we wanted active and involved parents who may not always get it right, but are sort of like they're well-intentioned toward their kids. They're not, I don't think they're modeled off anyone in particular, maybe a little bit like Rhonda, they're composite of people. I have certainly met Three's, my son plays hockey. I have certainly met the hockey version of Three's dad, with all of that sort of intensity. And so he's maybe more based on people in the real world than the others. I don't know, Kim, are any of the parents based on real people for you?
No, I think they are like a combination of people that I've experienced. My son is like a guy who likes to play sports, but is not a hardcore sporty guy. And so now he does stuff like ultimate frisbee and things like that he finds interesting. But we, during his, he's in high school now, but during his, little league years, like peewee football and, t-ball and all of that. There were definitely parents in the stands who were like going hard. And I'm like, they're 5. If they make it to a base without falling, it's been a successful day.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time at the hockey rink being like, are they awarding the Stanley Cup tonight? Because the level of intensity in here is surely like someone's got a bonus riding on this. I don't know what, but it's a lot.
It's so true. I mean, it starts so young too, like even 5th grade, the parents, it's pretty intense. The other thing that I was wondering too was about like, if you had the ability to choose any age group, I'm just so thankful that you chose the senior year, because it's so hard. Kids are about to become adults on their own in some situations, depending on their family setup, or, and senior year, it's kind of like when you get into the middle school years, the middle grade books, they talk about how hard that transition is into middle school for girls, for the main characters, whether it's girls or boys, honestly. And then I think you kind of touch on what it's like to be, in your senior year, and how challenging that is, and how much rides on this year, this final year of when people are kind of more accepting of the fact that you're not like an actual adult yet, but you feel like an adult that can make adult decisions. So how did you decide to do the senior year?
We just thought it was good stakes. Like the stakes are really high your senior year. So this is when you're like waiting on your college acceptances and things like that. And so it's like to start getting in trouble your senior year after you've had this stellar record, or at least after you've had a clear and concise plan the entire year, we just thought it like really raised the stakes to make them like screw up the most important year and the most like transitioning year. And they did it accidentally, thoughtlessly. And then they had so much consequence to deal with.
Yeah. It's also fun as a writer to write about people on the precipice, right? Senior year is a precipice. Change is inevitable for you at that point in time, whatever it might look like. For a lot of kids, it looks like college. For a lot of other kids, it doesn't look like college. It looks like technical school or a job or something else in life. And it's really fun to write about people on the precipice. Like, so we always say a plot requires movement, right? When aspiring authors ask us, what do I do when I'm stuck? My advice is always kill somebody off and see who cares, metaphorically speaking, right? Require that your characters go through a major change, something that is big enough to move them off the trajectory that they're on and onto a different trajectory. And senior year kind of lends itself really beautifully to that, because big change is coming for them no matter what.
To honor your time, I just want to thank you from all of us at Project Lit, all of the chapter leaders, from Jared. I don't know if he's I know he's there. We are so grateful to Source Books for this opportunity, for the ARCs. I can't even believe you guys don't have a physical copy. I don't even know how, I don't know how that happens. Like I remember being on Twitter and someone sharing an ARC and the author saying, I don't even have a copy. I'm like, how does that happen? It's so crazy.
Well, you guys are more important than us at this point.
I guess. So thank you so very much. Jared, you want to try to say something? I saw you sign, my friend.
I think we're in Pennsylvania still. I have no idea. No, where are we? We're in New Jersey. New Jersey, maybe. We're making it. We left the house like 5 a.m. this morning. It's summer vacation, and y'all were awesome. This was a great way to pass the time, and thank you everyone for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we are big Project Lit fans, as I said when we started out. So we're excited to be here and hope the book is useful to you guys.
You guys are awesome.